Hi guys, so let's start the work from the first object that we're gonna cover in this course. It will be a label. Okay, so we will create a new Xcode project. It will be a single view application, and the product name we will just name it label. Okay, click next and save it in our desktop. Okay, so this is the main working interface. We are now moving to main.storyboard. This is our storyboard canvas, and this is our first scene, and this is the first view controller by default. Whatever we do here, it will directly affect our application. This is the screen of our app. Okay, so as we're now doing with the label, just now among all of these objects, we should find a label object. Here we go. This is a label. So if you just make a simple click on it, it shows this is read-only text view that shows some certain text. So what is label? Whatever the text you see in your app or in any application, probably this is a label itself. So just let's see that UI label in iOS. So we will see the clear example what is UI label object is. So for example, this seems some real app. So that one is a label, that one is a label, that one is a label, this one is a label, this one is a label. So everything that contains some text and that shows text back to user, probably and mostly it's a label. Okay, so label is the very oftenly used object, so we gonna now work with that. Okay, if you did find a label among your objects, select it and simply drag it to your project. Here we go. So it means our label is in our view. If you see here, this label, it's inside of our view controller, and this is our view controller. It means the frame, it's the screen. So the screen has some view to store it back. Here we go. This is our label that we placed. Okay, so this is a view controller. This is the frame, and this frame stores a view. This view, it means this white background which you have, and this view has a label. So whatever you place inside of your view controller, it's gonna be the child of this view. So let's place one more label just for an example. So it's gonna be inside of the view. So it means this is the view, and all of the objects are stored in the view. There is no any way to store this object outside of the view. It's just not logical, and you never could do that. Okay, so this is our label. If you run your app, so you will see that label appears in your app. This is your actually application. Okay, so select your label and we will go through. Select your label, and in the right panel here we see inspect us. So select the first one, it's a file inspector. If we select the file inspector, here is just the main information about the label, that it's stored in the main storyboard, and that is the location of the main storyboard, and it used, for example, in Xcode 8, and here we're using auto layout and so on. Okay, now we will go to the quick help inspector. If you select here, here is written just the main Apple documentation description about the label. Definitely, I'm suggesting you to read that very carefully and walk through of that. While you're reading, I can wait to hear definitely. So pause the video and read it. Okay, so this is just the main and summary information about the label written by Apple. We can go further. This is Identity Inspector. So here you see class. It means we can create a dedicated coding class or a coding document which should be of type UI label. And we can create this file, for example, like a view controller that you have. This is your coding file as well as app delegate. So we can create some dedicated coding class for label, and this class should be of type UI label. Once we created that and program it, then we can assign it to that label here. For example, if you go to your view controller, this is of type UI view controller. So the class that you create for the label, it should be of type UI label. So let's now stop on the classes. If you select your view controller and you go to the identity inspector, here is reference class view controller. So it means whatever we write code inside the view controller.swift, it will directly affect this view controller scene. Okay, this is the meaning of that. So for the label again, to summarize it, we can create some dedicated coding class for the label. It should be of type UI label. Inside we can write the code that we want. We can then select our label and assign here, write the coding class that we wrote. For example, let it be my label.swift. It's just an example, but definitely it's not gonna work because we didn't create it. So let's remove it. Okay, here we can assign modules, and here we can assign identifier for our label. So currently we don't need that. Mostly identifiers are used. For example, you can assign some identifier, and in code you can uh, get or retrieve objects which have, for example, the certain identifier that you created. This is just the walkthrough for you. So then we have user-defined runtime attributes, where we can create key path, type, and value. This is we never gonna use it, so we will keep it here. Then we can create, for example, some specific labels. We can just assign, it's just a tag. So we can tag some of the objects like exactly like you can do it in Mac OS X. Okay, so this is the object ID of the label. Xcode creates it automatically, and we really not gonna use that. So then here is just an alignment. This is also not used by us. So then we have accessibility label hint identifier here. So then we have this things. So actually the main about the identity inspector with the label, we are done. Here is just the main attributes. If you deselect user interaction enabled, user cannot interact with that. For example, later on we will learn how assign a tap or different rotate and pinch gestures to different views. If you deselect user interaction enabled, if you declare for the label tap, imagine when you tap the label, it should, for example, get bigger. If you deselect it, when you tap the label, nothing gonna happen. So it's better to keep it user interaction enabled. Okay, we can go directly to now attributes inspector. This is very oftenly used in main storyboard. Select attributes inspector, and here is we have a types of the texts. So it can be either plain or attributed. Attributed means you can like more customly attributed, like left, middle, right, or just the line alignment, where you can work with the colors and so on, where you can work with the spacing for the paragraph, for the line spacing, and so on. So this is attributed text and this is a plain text. The only difference is that in attributed text you can work more if you're familiar with Photoshop, like making this controlling all of the gaps, how the lines are break the text direction, and so on. So this is like more advanced if you want some of your text looks something like more specific. So mostly used plain. plain, it means it will be just a plain text. Then in this line you can write any text that you want inside of your label manually. For example, let's write my label and click enter. So it will directly affect your label. Okay, we select your label and we're going next. Color, if you click here to drop down, here is some ready colors of iOS or the recently used one. For example, we can select red, or we can select like dark gray text color. Another way of playing with color, you can select this color shape, and here is 5 types of choosing colors. This is something like a ready colors you can play with, and here you can play with opacity. If we go to the next one, here is like a more specific spectrum you can select for you, again playing with the opacity. If we go to the third one, here is just the general colors like green, orange, purple, red, yellow, and so on. And here you can play with the iPad SDK, WebSave colors, and so on. We can go further, and here we can play like with the brightness. This is a grayscale. Here is red, green, blue colors, and this is how we can play with that. And the last one, of course, for most of the people is the more user friendly, where you can select colors from the red, green, and blue spectrum. For example, let it be just a red color. Okay, so this is how we work with the color. So then we have a font. You can select just like, let it be system font. It's just a system font of the Apple. Italic, you know that this is going to be italic. Or you can see here is the styles of the text, like headline and so on. So it automatically will make it a little bit bold and so on. So let's now select a custom font. And here we can select some family of the font, anything you want. So let's, for example, select chalkboard. Okay, so we select the chalkboard, and here we can get a style, like it can be either light, regular, or bold. It depends on the family of the font. And here we can play with the sizes of the font. So regarding fonts, it also clear for us. And then we can play with the alignment as well, like left, centered, right, or the full line alignment. Okay, so let's now for a while just stretch our label a little bit. So we stretched our label and we made it centered. And the lines, if it is one line, we can use only one line text. For example, here let's write something like second line. Okay, if we write that, we are enabled to see that. But if we make 2 lines available in our label, so it appears. So you can make a break holding Alt command and enter. Here we'll write third line. So if we make a number of lines 3, so we are able to do that. So what if we are getting text programmatically and actually we don't know how many lines should we use? For example, for some users we can use like 2 lines, for some 3. For that there is a nice way. For example, let's add fourth line, and here number of lines will play 0, so it will automatically define how many lines are used and it will be adjusted to that. So then we have a behavior enabled or highlighted. So highlighted or enabled. Enabled means that label is enabled. It's a good way to use enabled all the time. Highlighted means, for example, when this label initially is highlighted. Of course, for highlighted, there is no any change initially will be visible for the user. But for the button, highlighted definitely will make a change. Imagine when you press a button, mostly buttons, they got highlighted. So highlighted means initially it will be in the highlighted format. Okay, then we have a baselines like align centers, align baselines, and so on. Then we have a line breaks like word wrap and so on. You can see that if we write just one, just without space when we write them. So this is how your text is going to be wrapped, like by characters, by words, and so on. Then we have an auto shrink. So this is a fixed font size, or we can select something like minimum font scale. So it will try to scale your font in the minimal way with using this coefficient. Or you can select the minimum font size, where you can play with the minimum font size and it will shrink it according to the device. So tighten letter spacing, it means it will use a tighten letters between tightened spacing between the characters. So then we see highlighted color of the label will be, let it be black, and if you select the state highlighted, so it will affect all the settings for the highlighted format. So let's deselect it. So then we can play with the shadow. We can select something like a purple shadow, and we see here is the purple shadow inside of our label. Shadow offset means the direction of the shadow. Let's zoom it, and we can play with the height and with the horizontal alignment of our shadow. So this is the logic of working with the shadow. Then we have a view section. So first one is content mode. It means feeling. So imagine if you have some picture and this is the frames. If you select like aspect fit, it will fit your image to feel these frames. Then we have a bottom left, so it will try to use it from the bottom left to feel bottom left, and the rest as per the size of the content. So the view, it's general for all of the objects, because every iOS object, this is the this is of type UI view. This is the type of, even my label, this is of type UI view, so it responds to this library. So that's why we can use it. Let's use a center. This is for label. It's not gonna make any effect. And here is the semantic, like force from right to left or left to right. This is also not gonna make any changes. Tag means you can assign some special tag, or it will be something like your own ID. Let it be one. For example, in code, you can write some logic like all of the object that has tag 1 make them, for example, invisible. Tag is just to tag your label. Okay, you can keep 1. User interaction enabled means you are allowing user to interact with your label. Multiple touch means you allow user to use multiple touch. Imagine if you add some rotate gestures or pinch gestures for your label, definitely it requires 2 fingers. So this way you should use a multiple touch. Alpha means is the level of opacity. So if you place 0, it means 0. If you place 1, it means 100%. The background color, it's the background color of your wall label. Let's use something like light blue. So this is the background color. It's according to the size and the frame of your label. Tint means all of the objects and buttons which are added to label tint color. So actually, and right now it's not gonna make any effect because there is no any tint. So then we have like opaque, hidden, clear graphic contents, clip to bounds, and auto resize some views. So mainly the logic of all of these titles are clear for us. For example, when we select hidden, our label, when we run it, it will be hidden and we will not see it in when we launch our app, so we are unable to see that. So that's why we will deselect it. Clear graphic contents, it's also clear for us. Clip to bones means clip content to the frame of the label. Auto resize subviews mean if it's required, auto resize all of the subviews of the label. So currently we don't have a subview from the label, and it's also not gonna make any effect. So this is actually the main attributes of our label. We can go then to the size. So here we can declare some preferred width, for example. Here we can work with the alignment rectangle when we can play with the X. X means horizontal alignment, Y means vertical alignment, width means the width of your label, and height means the height of your label. So auto resizing mask means when you try to use width fill by width or horizontally, it will try to fill as per your orientation. So imagine if you use a landscape and you use that one, so it will try to fill it like shown here on the demonstration. So this is also a logical point for that. And then we have a connection inspector. Here in connection inspector we can use, for example, asset gesture recognizer that we will learn definitely later on in this course, reference outlet or outlet connection. For example, imagine that we want to code exactly this label inside of our coding class, let it be view controller. How we can directly access this label? We can access it using outlet connections. So let's see how outlet connections are working on the practice.